So we have this theme today of these three liberating understandings, which are very much at the heart of the Buddhist teaching. In a way, they're central to the whole process of waking up and liberation. You can't find anything outside of these teachings that are as relevant as these three insights. Before we begin on the material, I just want to reflect a little bit on this word insight, because you hear it all the time, don't you? And yet it's often kind of a puzzle for people, what does an insight look like? How do I know if I've had one? What's it supposed to do? People don't always sit down and have a chat about their insights. So just to speak a little bit about this process of insight, a penetrating understanding that is really intended to change us, to change how we see, to change how we perceive, to change how we live and how we navigate our way through this world. It's not necessarily an epiphany moment. Sometimes people come to practice and they're kind of on the lookout for their own Bodhi tree moment, that it's bound to come along, this startling insight. For most people, it's not like this. For most people, insight is a quiet deepening of understanding. And sometimes we actually don't even really acknowledge a point where something has changed. And yet we find ourselves going into a situation where it's previously been charged in some way, or, where we found ourselves very reactive, and suddenly it's not there. And we realize something has fallen away. And insight, this process of insight, is actually often very much a process of the falling away of the unhelpful and the unskillful patterns in our own hearts and minds. And this is a process. The Buddha spoke about this deepening of understanding very much as a process. He said the first part of that process is to listen to the teaching. How does this shift how you see the world? For me, that was, deeply important. When I first began to practice in a community of refugees who, had essentially lost everything, and yet their hearts were intact. They exuded this quite remarkable levels of joyfulness and generosity. And I thought, well, these folks know something that I don't know. So I went and I began to listen to the teachings. And, I was a 17-year-old, probably rather privileged Westerner, who I thought I knew how the world worked. In fact, I was quite sure of it. And suddenly, even to hear very simple teachings around ill will. I grew up in northern Canada where it was kind of a norm to kill things, anything that irritated you in the, creature world, you killed it. That was what you did. I have very strong memories of my mother running around with fly swatters and to hear that there might be a better way of actually moving through this world than annihilating everything that irritated me was actually quite a revelation. So the first step is always to listen to the teachings and to hear that there might be another way of being and another way of living that is not laced with distress and struggle. And the second step of insight, according to the Buddha, is let us reflect upon the teachings. It's actually a cognitive engagement. Let us reflect upon the teachings. What does this mean for me? Do I agree with this? Does it make sense? And then to move into more of an experiential exploration. How do I know this within my own experience? And then, of course, the last of the steps of insight is actually to embody what we understand. To embody what we understand. There's also, I think, some quite different domains of insight. I think there is a level of personal understanding, personal clear comprehension, which I think is very essential to deepening on this path. In a way, we need to understand how we came to this place of believing ourselves to be a particular kind of person. We're all the children of the conditions in our lives, aren't we? And they come together and shape our sense of self, they shape our views, they shape our perceptions, they shape our sense of identity. And it is actually quite important to be at peace with that story. We might to stop wishing for a different story. Yeah? This is how we ended up here. It's not a final destination. But it helps to actually remove some of the obsession, the rumination, I wish I was different, how do I end up here, that sense of bewilderment, to make peace with our story. It's a level of personal insight. And then there is, as the Buddha refers to it, this level of universal understanding. It's both personal and it's universal. It is about the three characteristics, the three universal principles that run through everything we can see, we can hear, we can touch, we can sense. The Buddha put it very simply. He said, and this is really at the heart of the Buddhist teaching, all conditioned phenomena are anicca, impermanent, changing, inconstant. All conditioned phenomena are dukkha, incapable of providing lasting happiness or freedom. And all conditioned phenomena are anatta, empty of an independent self-existence. The Buddha said that to understand this deeply and experientially is a direct means of bringing affliction and suffering to an end. So this is our invitation of the day. This is our focus of the day, to begin to unpack this kind of very central teaching and to really contemplate how this really applies to us. How much do we live in the light of those understandings and those teachings? Are we dedicated to bringing distress and suffering to an end?